Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the follow-up to the Abominable Dr. Phibes, which I did a video for a few weeks back, with this sequel produced just 1 year later in 1972, titled Dr. Phibes Rises Again, which of course sees a return of Vincent Price as well as the addition of Peter Cushing to this entry, which, well, this will be a little bit of a short one, but let's start with the synopsis, which reads as follows. The vengeful doctor rises again, seeking the scrolls of life in an attempt to resurrect his deceased wife. Now, we not only have the return of Price and the addition of Cushing, but also the return of Peter Jeffrey as our detective, and of the Volnavia character, though portrayed by a different actress, in this entry, which was, well, not as good as the original. So this return was pretty elaborate and, of course, very unrealistic, but who really cares about that? Anyways, it's still very interesting in that, as they state, he rises again because he had put himself in this suspended animation after his escape at the end of the other film, and has now woken up 3 years later during a specific celestial alignment to find his dwelling above him has been destroyed. His plan upon waking was to take his wife, who he had put in a similar suspended animation until that celestial event, which unlocks the power to resurrect her, to Egypt to seek this river of life, which is what he's going to use to bring her back. But while he was in suspended animation in the bowels of his lair, as mentioned, this old place was destroyed, and unfortunately there was an ancient scroll that Phibes was in possession of, and he requires on this trip to Egypt, which was recovered by, from the ruins from a third party. So his trusty assistant Volnavia, who, as I mentioned, returns as well, has to retrieve it so they can go on a trip to Egypt. Now, it's really hard to kind of write much about this one because compared to the first, it just didn't really do that well for me. Where the first one had a very interesting aspect of the biblical plagues being used as the theme for each murder, which was carried out for the sake of revenge, this one, the murders are happening as he's just trying to get his wife to this temple to resurrect her. These murders and the situations around them and the reasons for them, I just didn't really find them as interesting, which kind of caused me to lose interest in the film. We do have an interesting aspect of one character who's lived for centuries due to this potion or elixir that he's been consuming, which as a result of his life-extending pursuits has him interested in this Egyptian temple and this river of life that Phibes is seeking, so he can hopefully assist him in extending his life continually as well. But the film just kind of felt all over the place. At its core, it switched from this idea of revenge via biblical plagues in the first film to two characters racing to obtain access to this river of life in Egypt, which coincides with and is enabled by this celestial event. It's just kind of jumbled for me. But I think that's what kind of pulled me away, was that, in the first film, once I saw that first kill, even though I'm only loosely familiar with biblical plagues, I wanted to see more. I wanted to see where it was going. And this idea of revenge regarding his wife, who I got like these borderline poetic narrations from Vincent Price regarding, almost made me sympathize with the Phibes character a bit, just a bit, enough to kind of mix things up rather than him simply being this purely evil killer. He had a little bit of depth there, and it was very interesting. Because of this, I was much more on board with that first film than I was with the second one, and I can't really see watching this one again. Now, it does have its moments, but after 30 minutes, it easily became a film which was simply like on in the background, one to have on while multitasking, since I just didn't find it to be as interesting as the first one. Now, that's also how some of the Hammer films went for me when I covered about 45 of them, I think, previously. Some were great, and I would easily watch again, and some didn't quite land as well. I've seen worse, but I've also seen better, and there wasn't really much to say about them, so I made these little 3-minute videos about it. I think the idea of the Phibes character is great, and there's definitely more room to kind of grow and do other things with that character, or there was, as one comment stated on the previous video, I believe, that there were plans for a third one that never really came to be. And I can see that. I can see this being a weak entry, but one which maybe would still be important in the case of it being part of a trilogy, let's say. And honestly, I wouldn't be against an attempt at like a reboot of this franchise. Handle it a little bit differently, tighten things up, and so on. But it seems like reboots and remakes are only done for titles which hold a lot of popularity, which doesn't make much sense to me, because if they're still popular for both old audiences and new, then obviously they don't need to be rebooted or remade in any way. But, you know, the Phibes character just doesn't seem to be a really popular one. You know, the original film kind of comes up sometimes when speaking about Price's work in general, but even, you know, thinking about a possible reboot, I don't even know who could ever replace Vincent Price in any role that he's ever done. But at any rate, while this one didn't really land for me, I still stick by that the original is definitely worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick little video for a film which was just kind of okay. I still want to work in more Vincent Price films, so be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.